Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Today we have Demystifying Exercise. I told you I can't pronounce words. And today it's being presented by Andrew Doubek, right? Okay. Andrew is a physical therapist at Thunder Bay Physical Therapy and Balance Center here in Alpena. And he earned his doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Michigan Flint in 2016. And so Andrew, the floor is yours, and
Thank
we
you.
look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. And I like to be pretty relaxed. So if you guys have questions throughout the presentation, please just let them fly and we can go through. And it looks like we got mics on either side. So I've been practicing physical therapy for 6 years. I have a geriatric specialty, and I've helped with community exercise classes and balance assessment in a community setting for reduced fall risk. One of the things that I really like to do is work on community outreach, because there's a lot of questions that I get in the clinic that I think would be so much easier to answer on a community-wide basis. A lot of people will ask me things that I kind of forget about because we're all slaves to our specialties now. And so things that seem really simple to me, I realize are only simple because I spent too many years and too much money learning about it. And that shouldn't be necessary for everyone to know. And so one of the questions I get the most is, well, how much should I be exercising? How active should I be? Am I running enough? Should I be deadlifting 300 pounds? Should I be, a lot of questions that, for some people seem really simple, but then some of the questions you're like, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to that. And so that's what I thought would be just a really fun topic to go over today. I think one of the reasons where this confusion comes from is a shift in culture and a shift in the fitness industry. So I look back even into like the industrial periods where a lot of careers involved a lot of labor. And so the idea of exercising was not really, it's kind of a foreign word like exercise. I get exercise every day. I'm working hard. And now we're starting to move a lot into office jobs, a lot of seated positions. And as a result of that, we're seeing a big change in health and even, believe it or not, body morphology. So the way our bodies are built and the change in a lot of our health conditions. As a result of that, we're seeing a shift to kind of like a mainstream, like fitness industry. So now we've got fitness professionals and influencers, people who kind of are riding the piggyback and trying to get people more active, but also that creates a lot of confusion as to like, what actually should I be doing? And I think these pictures that I put on the screen are a good example of like people see these things and half the population is like, that's cool, I want to do that. And then the other half is like, I do not want to do that. That scares the heck out of me. And you can walk into a gym today and see these things happening today. This is completely unnecessary. Is it cool? Maybe. Dangerous? Probably. But those are the things that people see, and this is what kind of creates confusion. So these are some of the questions that I hear regularly in the clinic. How long should I be exercising? How often? How hard should I be working? Should this hurt? Do you guys have any other questions that come to mind? Like you came today bringing these questions in. Anyone in the crowd have any right now? No one? I know someone does, otherwise you wouldn't have showed up today. Or are they being addressed here? Okay. So you guys are saying it's already being addressed. Okay, so to make a difference. So I like to look at this as, let's make this as simple as possible from the highest possible source. So right now, the group that has the most conclusive exercise recommendations is the World Health Organization. They just came out with a new updated paper in 2020, and these are the recommendations that they're giving. So the biggest thing that they've got is, the most recommendation they've got is looking at cardiovascular exercise. So cardiovascular exercise is basically an exercise that will change your heart rate over a certain period of time. They're looking at the amount of minutes per week. So they're saying 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous exercise a week. Obviously, there can be some sort of combination there. So that's just breaking it down. And we'll talk a little bit later about what that means, like moderate versus high intensity. That's important. But for now, what that breaks down to, I don't know if anyone here is a math geek, but we're looking at like 30 to 45 minutes of exercise a day, around 5 days a week, every week. So who here finds that surprising? Yeah, yeah, that's a lot. That's every week. That's minimum recommendations. So they're saying this is where we should be starting, not where we should be ending. This is where we should be starting. So this is one thing that I'd love to share with everyone, because that surprises a lot of people. Like that amount sounds way outside of what most people are expecting to hear. We'll keep talking about that. But that's just something to have in the back of your mind. I'm going to repeat that, like 30 to 45 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise 5 times a week. So we'll just think about that. A couple other things they're suggesting: 3 or more days a week. So like they're breaking that. What they're doing there is they're breaking that time up. Another thing that they're saying with that is going no more than 2 days without exercise. So basically what they're saying is it is more advantageous. You don't want to get the 300 minutes in one day and call it good. The idea is that if you get more exercise more consistently in shorter time periods, that is more advantageous than getting it all done at once and then sitting multiple days. So they're finding that sedentary behavior is what's really doing more damage than if you were to get all of it done in one day. Another change that this paper made was previously and I'm going to go ahead and say I'm completely quoting this paper from the World Health Organization, that they are no longer saying it is necessary to get pre-exercise clearance from your physician. That is probably different than from what most of you have heard. You've probably all heard, check with your doctor first. Why they made that change is because they're finding that people are not exercising, waiting to go to their physician, maybe forgetting that visit. Like, is it safe? Maybe you were in for another issue, and then maybe let's say it's 2 years before you start exercising because you're waiting for that pre-physician clearance. This does not mean that you should just go try run a marathon today or start lifting heavy weight today. That is not what that's saying. What it's saying is don't be afraid to start exercising today. So if something is wrong, definitely go see your physician. If you're having a specific issue, definitely go see your physician. It's not saying that that's not an important concept. It's just saying that we need to start exercising today or tomorrow. Like as soon as you can start incorporating that into your daily life, that is what that is saying. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we can start asking some questions about when is it safe or unsafe to start exercise. But what it's just saying is, the day to start is today or tomorrow. We're not waiting. And then this one is a little more, I've seen a couple different papers on this. Some people are saying strength training 2 days a week. Some people are saying 3 days a week. The idea is that you're also incorporating some strength building into your routine, not just the cardiovascular work. They're saying all major muscle groups, easy enough. You know, gets a lot of flack. I don't know if you guys have ever met Dr. Google. He or she's a good guy or woman. You say Dr. Google in the medical community and people cringe, but it really is the age of information is fantastic. You can go online right now and type in exercises for major muscle groups, and you'll get a list of more exercise than you can handle for the next 10 years. It really is great. But that's kind of where I start, honestly, is, you know, look it up. You can go to the library and find strength training books. They have great exercises for major muscle groups. And then this is another change that they made that I was really surprised with. They're saying balance training if needed. The prior paper said everyone should be having balance training. The new one said only if you need it, which I was pretty shocked. My expertise is in balance training and fall risk reduction. So I'm a little biased on that end. And I feel like everyone should have balance training, but they're saying, you know, like, if that's not the low hanging fruit, then you don't have to worry about it. I find it actually easy enough to incorporate that into the other, like the cardiovascular and the strength training, that I think it's worth just like sneaking some of it in. But that is their recommendation, that if you need it, add some balance exercises in there. And then, we already talked about the reducing sedentary behavior. Any questions on this paper in particular, or these minimal requirements? So this,
I have one, Andrew.
Yes.
Andrew, do these recommendations vary somewhat with age?
No. So actually, that's a good time to bring this up. That also was a change that was made by this paper, is that there were stratified, stratified to age and health conditions before this came out. It was pretty minimal, but they are saying now this is true anywhere from teenage years to up into your hundreds, your 10th decade. You'll see that there were recommendations for the American Heart Association for heart failure, congestive heart failure. Those are the same. You look at the Diabetes Association, that is the same. So we're talking every group, this is the minimal recommended dosage. Yeah, good question though. How many people find that surprising?
I do.
Yeah. So almost everyone's got their hands up. Yeah, good. Any other questions on these recommendations in particular? Okay. Okay, so those recommendations come with some caveats. So the big takeaway I want to come from today, like if you guys don't remember anything else and just remember this, those were the minimum recommendations. Do I think anyone here should start that today? Absolutely not. If I had to be honest, I probably don't even hit those recommendations. The idea is that you want to start working towards that. So if you're doing no exercise today, doing 5 minutes tomorrow is better than no exercise. Always some is better than none. The big problem I see a lot in my clinic is that people recognize, they come to the realization that they've had problems with their health or changed their function because they've lacked exercise. And then they decide to get into a routine and they do too much. And either then they deal with some sort of backlash, either like delayed onset muscle soreness or joint pain or some sort of health exacerbation because they tried to do too much. And then it's a vicious cycle where they do that. They have a really negative experience and then they don't do it again because it was a very painful or an unpleasant experience. My general rule of thumb is I almost never double something I'm doing. So if I walk half a block today, I'm not gonna double that tomorrow, or I'm not going to double the amount of weight I'm going to lift tomorrow, or I'm not going to dance twice as long tomorrow. I scale that back a little bit is my general rule of thumb. I haven't seen any research to support how much you should go by. I think that's intensely individual. Some people have a really high capacity. Other people, because of joint pain or some sort of underlying health condition, maybe their capacity is cut back a little bit. The idea is always that you're working up to the minimal recommendation, not trying to get there tomorrow. And then, yeah, and then, oh yeah, I talked about both of those. Let's see. We talked about that. Okay, so another thing we should talk about is what are the expectations of how you should feel following exercise. So in particular, one thing that I get a lot is really like, let's say someone who hasn't exercised in maybe, I don't know, 20, 30. I've worked with people who have not exercised in 50 years. That's a little bit rare, but definitely within the last decade, a lot of people who I see have not exercised in the last decade. And, you know, that's a long time not to know what it feels like to exercise. Big thing I'm looking for, especially with like strength training, is that you are going to feel some discomfort with the strength training. That's not a bad thing as long as it's in the correct places. So you're thinking wide onset. So like, let's say, for example, if I'm looking at, I don't think you can see it on screen. So I'm going to put here. So like, if we're thinking, if you did like a standard bicep curl, you are looking for widespread discomfort, low level in the biggest part of your muscle belly. So like in the biggest part of your muscle, that's where you're looking for small amounts of discomfort. What you're not looking for is very specific, sharp discomfort in a joint location. So let's say I'm doing a bicep curl and I'm feeling sharp specifically at my shoulder joint. That's more describing like a joint pain rather than like a delayed muscle soreness. And what you're looking for is anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, you may feel that discomfort. That should be going away. If that's not going away within 48 hours, you are either thinking that that exercise was not an effective one for you, or you did too much of it and you want to scale that back, or at that point either change exercises or then talk to a professional. So that's a big difference where you're thinking that you want to get that discomfort in the muscle group rather than that joint pain. That's a big one that I hear quite often, I would say.
I have a question.
Please.
I have been to a doctor and I've mentioned that I thought I'd torn a tendon in my arm.
Mm-hmm.
He told me it was arthritis in the shoulder, and I said, that's not where the pain is at. So what exercise can I do to improve the pain in here?
I'm going to say that you would want to have a full workup on that. Yeah. So
The doctor I talked to said that there was nothing wrong with my arm, but yet yesterday I did some heavy lifting, carrying a computer and stuff out to my truck. And that last night I was in the truck and I went to go lift my arm and got sharp pain.
okay.
I know what it is, but I just want to know, how can I make it better?
Yeah.
Do I ice it? Do I exercise it?
So I would say I'm probably going to hold off on answering that in the way that that sounds very, very specific to a scenario.
Mhm.
And you would want like a full workup on that.
I don't have
And-
insurance and I'm not seeing the doctor that told me there was nothing wrong with the arm.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't have a doctor.
Yeah. What about, so you guys are gonna all have to forgive me for this one because I am extremely biased. Have you seen a physical therapist, or have you been able to
No.
get a workup on that?
No.
Okay. Have you checked up on if, I know you said you didn't have insurance, but I think in particular, like the hospital has programs that may be able to get you in. Would that be a possibility to check into that?
Yeah, I can check into that.
Yeah. So, and why I'm choosing not to answer that question in its entirety is because I would want to see like which movements are creating that dysfunction. So I think, so that's actually a really good example of where that recommendation not to get pre-clearance would be on the other end of that, where like that's very specific. You're getting pain with this activity in this spot. That's exactly where, unfortunately, you would want to get that.
I'll explain what happened was I was working for Northern Promotions. It was I was putting pictures in frames, and the guys thought it was cute to stack blank empty frames on a pallet 6 feet high. I'm
Okay.
5'4". I reached up, grabbed about 15, and felt electricity go down the arm.
Okay.
And I reported it to the boss, and he says, "Oh, I don't think there's anything wrong."
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah, that would be an example of something a little more specific that you would want to get evaluated.
I will.
Okay.
I'll check into it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good. Yeah, absolutely. Any other, thank you for that question. Any other questions on what you should be feeling? Not yet. Okay. Okay. So this is something we already talked about. Thanks, Gramps. Again, this is kind of where, a lot of people will say, well, I can't exercise. I have COPD. Say, okay, well, you were told not to exercise? And they're like, no, it's just uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, yeah, probably. And that's not being me being unsympathetic. What that is that actually that is where you get more value. So if you have an underlying health condition, in a lot of instances, it is even more important for you to meet those minimal requirements. This is tough. I work with a lot of patients with, in particular, like stroke and Parkinson's, and they're like, "Well, I can't do that. I've got a stroke or I've got Parkinson's," and if you look at those recommendations, they are the same. Actually, the Parkinson's Association came out. They're even upping them for people with Parkinson's. And a lot of people are like, whoa, that is crazy. They're already having a hard enough time moving, and now you're telling them to do more. It's like, yeah, absolutely. The tough thing is with specific conditions come more difficulty. And that's where it is helpful to have a trained professional on your team for that. So that's one thing that people get surprised at. When I tell them, they're like, I have problems why I can't do this. And it's like, well, there are some limitations there, and we have to change some things in how we evaluate this, but the minimum is still the same. Okay, so this is something that is a very new idea to a lot of people. So that recommendation, you guys might have noticed that there was both a time component and an intensity component. How many of you here measure your intensity with exercise?
Uh,
You used to. How did you measure that? Beautiful. So what's your name, sir? Do you mind if I ask? Mike. So Mike here is using a heart rate monitor to measure his intensity. That is perfect. Anyone else measure their intensity? Okay. So as of now, heart rate is well, below Olympic athletes, heart rate is the gold standard for measuring intensity. I put on here, there's a real fancy calculation for describing your maximum heart rate. And then what you would do is do a certain percentage below that. That's too much math for me. I did what I could to pass math classes just to get through school. I don't want to do that. What I use, and this is totally cheating, and I am so not ashamed, is there's apps on your phone. I'm also cheap in addition to being bad at math. So I don't pay for anything. There's an app on the App Store called Heart Rate Zone. You can get a free heart rate calculation. All you do is you type in your resting heart rate. So you can do that. You're just kind of hanging out, either grabbing the bars on the exercise bike, or it's called a pulse oximeter. It goes on your finger. A lot of workout centers have them. You just do that, you find your resting heart rate, and then you enter your age into it. That's it. Resting heart rate, age. And that's honestly, that's how I do my job. Resting heart rate and age, really easy. And then what you're looking for here is like recommended zone is like 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. Again, you do not want to get up there on the first day. You will work your way up to that. So let's say probably the biggest instance where I use this is we know with people with Parkinson's, increased aerobic capacity will push blood flow and the dopamine, a neurotransmitter, into your brain and help them regulate their medication more effectively. So I use heart rate with every single person who has Parkinson's who walks in my clinic. A lot of times I'll get them to probably like 50, 60% heart rate. That's okay. We're starting to move to that 70, 80% as we go through therapy with me. And I have some people, like I have one person right now who took 3 years to get there. That's okay, you know, as long as you're working there. For the rest of us, you know, maybe you don't have a heart rate monitor. Maybe you're not going to the gym. Maybe you're just walking, you know, well, shoot, now I'm out of luck. I don't have a heart rate monitor. Guess I can't measure intensity. Not true. We've got, and again, Dr. Google's great for this. It's a scale called the rate of perceived exertion. So this is all like how you perceive your exertion. You can see there's two versions. There's a 1 to 10, or I use a 6 to 20 scale. I know that sounds like a really weird way to do it. What that's for is originally, I think this was developed in, let's say Germany, but I could be wrong. But the idea is that those scales actually match up to a percentage of heart rate, is why that original scale was like this. Since then, they've modified to also have a 1 to 10 scale. And what you're looking for is that 5 to 7 range. Like if you're in that range, you're right in the slot. You're golden. And again, that's you're getting your way there. So for a lot of people, they will start and they'll be like, man, I'm at a 3, but my muscles are getting sore. It's like, okay, well then your muscles are the limiting factor, not your heart rate. And that's fine. That means you're building up your muscles. You'll get there eventually. Or someone will say, man, I only got to a 4, but my foot started hurting. It's like, okay, well, don't get to the 5 or 7 because your foot started hurting. You know, you don't want to make it worse. But that's the idea, is that maybe now you want to change what you're doing so that you can get your exertion up. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. But I keep little, you know, you can have this on your phone, or I keep in our clinic, I actually print these out and I have them. So I, you know, hand that to a person and say like, hey, how did that feel? And then I'll use that to scale how they exercise. Or maybe you just have one at home and you go for your walk and you come back and you take a peek. It's like, oh, I did really good today. I got probably up to that 6, and that feels really good. Or as you know, I get guilty of this all the time. I run with a coworker and I'll look at it and be like, I probably got to a 4 today, but man, I had a good conversation with her. So it's kind of one of those things where, you know, it's just, this is a way to combat not having a heart rate monitor attached to you at all times. One of my favorite things, and again, the problem is I'm pretty cheap, but eventually what I want to get, I don't know, have you guys seen either those Apple Watches or the Fitbits with the heart rate monitors on it? Those are cool. I advise everyone to get one, even though I'm a hypocrite and I don't have one myself. But like if you can afford it, or if that's something you'd like to use, that's a really cool thing. Another cool thing about that is that you can set those zones on that. So I think, for example, my mom, we got her an Apple Watch, I'm gonna say like 4 years ago. And what we did with that is you can set your high and low heart rate zone. And so it'll beep at you, it'll vibrate if you fall outside of that zone. Or let's say the other one is that if you go too high, you know, you don't want to put yourself in danger. So it gets she gets going, maybe a little rage walking or something like that, and it'll go too high and it'll give her a thing saying, hey, you got to chill out. You're gonna sprint through a brick wall here. So those are really cool tools, and I hope I'm gonna get one soon. But you don't need it. Also, is what I'm saying is you can use perceived exertion for a general look at that. Does anyone else have any other ideas on like intensity? Have they measured that or thought about how to scale that before? The real old school version was talking. Like if you were walking or swimming and talking, the idea is that you can still get words out, but maybe like if you can get a sentence out, you might not be exercising hard enough. The tough thing with that is that I am very good at talking. Pretty much when I'm asleep is the only time I'm not talking. So it's not a real good example for me because I can get my heart rate up high and still keep talking. So that's a little more inexact art form is like, you know, if you can say a paragraph, probably not hard enough. But if you're trying to struggle to breathe between words, that might be too much. Has anyone heard that before? The talking example? Some people, okay, lots of people are saying yes. Okay, so some additional stuff, because I know some people, the cardiovascular, the strength training, people tend to understand that pretty well. Some additional questions I've had is, you know, since the popularization of the Fitbit has come out, they're like, oh yeah, I got 2,000 steps. That's pretty good. And I'm like, well, so again, this is all working towards that goal. Minimum recommendation for maintenance of bone density. So a lot of people have heard of osteoporosis or osteopenia and heard that, you know, the gold standard for osteoporosis, osteopenia is calcium medication and weight-bearing exercise. So walking is a huge one for that. Are people walking far enough? They're saying 5,000 steps is the minimum recommended for maintaining bone density. Recommended for community ambulation is much higher. I believe it's 10,000 steps. And that's I think what the Fitbit is, their preset, I believe is 10,000. So they must have read that research, I assume. Again, that is something you work towards. So let's say my suggestion would be if you have one and it's new or you've been using it for a while, see what you're at to start with. Don't start shooting for 10,000 or 5,000 on the first day. Wear it for a few days. See what you're actually getting. So like, let's say you're only getting 1,500 steps. Not a good idea to go for 5,000 steps your first day. You might be going for like 2,000 by the next week or 2 weeks. So just appropriate scaling. But that's the minimum recommendation for bone maintenance. Balance, I promise to try and keep this short because it's something I have studied a lot. That's something they're saying for those who it's indicated for, you want to put balance exercises into your routine. So a lot of people ask, well, that's great, but how do I know if I'm indicated for balance dysfunction? 3 questions that the CDC will ask. Have you fallen in the last year? Are you afraid of falling? Has the fear of falling limited you from activity? So if you've said yes to any of those 3 questions, your risk of falling goes up by 33% with each consecutive yes. So most of the time, I'll get a lot of people who will say, I haven't fallen. Okay, are you afraid of falling? No, I just don't do anything. It's like, well, okay, so that limitation is because of the fear of falling. It doesn't mean that you are not afraid, and there's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's just that let's address that. I mean, you know, if you're not going out to the restaurant, but you're not afraid, why'd you guys want to go out to I want to go to the restaurant. I'm not going to let that stop me. And that's just something where, like, if you're afraid, well, let's talk about adding some balance things in and see if we can improve that. We know balance can improve no matter what the circumstance. And then people will ask, well, if balance is indicated, how much should I use? So if you're at fall risk, there's quite a few papers that are saying, like, over a 6-month time period, they're recommending 50 hours of practice spread over that 6-month time period. So that's breaking down to like half an hour a day, 3 days a week. Again, that's a lot, but like if you break those up into smaller chunks, I actually recommend people are practicing daily and very small amounts. So like I'm talking like 5-10 minutes. Like you should not need much. If you want to do more than that, you're going to get there faster. But the big thing with me is if people are afraid of falling, a lot of times that limits their activity. So getting in those small bouts makes people more likely to be successful. What else we have? Okay, so that is the end of the formal material I had ready, with the assumption that I'll probably have a lot of questions at the end, because there's a lot unsaid there. Those are just the minimal recommendations, but there are a lot of different scenarios as to how you can be successful with exercise every day. Any questions right off the bat?
Yeah, I guess I'll talk about this balance thing, but I fly fish
Mm-hmm.
and I stopped wading upstream because
Yeah.
I'm finding it too difficult.
Yeah.
And then recently I've been finding wading downstream, I felt unease or something that I struggled with it. Is that a balance issue or a strength issue? Is there anything I can do to store my confidence in doing that?
Yes. The answer to that last part is yes. Can you increase your confidence? Yes. There's a lot of different ways. To the question of is it strength or balance, I don't know. I would have to evaluate that. I would say the punchline of that, though, is it doesn't matter. What does matter is if you can practice a scenario close to that, and if you get some either daily or weekly practice in that scenario, you can improve your confidence in that. So like, let's say, for example, that I had you in my clinic and I found out that maybe the issue is the sensation in the bottom of your feet is not what it used to be. Very, very common. You guys might have heard of neuropathy before. I get that all the time as guys go stream fishing. They're like, I can't feel the bottom of my feet. Like it's not the same as it used to be. Maybe then what we do is we practice standing on one foot so that your ankles and hips will compensate for that. Or let's say maybe your vision is getting worse. Again, very common. Maybe then we want to add in some like head turning exercises or vestibular exercises to make your inner ear, that internal gyroscope, compensate for that. So basically the idea is, like I get really into the fine details. I'm a nerd, don't have much of a social life. So I really dig into like the really nitty gritty of each of those scenarios. But it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, like if you can, my suggestion is if you can practice something similar to what that feels like, your brain will adapt. You don't have to know what the problem is. If you can get close to that scenario, your brain will figure out how to compensate for that. I would say the best case scenario is if you can practice something actually more challenging than where you're having the problem, then when you go into that scenario, you're going to have a ton of confidence. And that's something I get in my clinic every day is people are like, I am never going to walk backwards on foam with my eyes closed. And I'm like, you're right. I hope you don't. But like if you practice that harder version, when you go to the real scenario, it should be a piece of cake. The other part of that, actually, I hope I can hijack your question, is so let's say maybe you don't want to work that hard, and that's okay. Like, let's say, you know, you have to practice an extra 15 minutes a day to get there. you know, there's also the option of maybe we add some compensation method. So in that particular instance, I got a lot of guys who, like I said, one of my favorite scenarios is like guys will want to go stream fishing, but they've got some diabetic neuropathy, and that's just becoming really, really difficult. You know, have you tried like a trekking pole in the river? So that's a great way to still stay active. Just add a little extra something. And I know a lot of people are concerned that they'll say like, well, that's a crutch. Like, I'm not going to do that. Or like they'll say, I'm not going to use a walker. Like, that's for old people. I hear that all the time. I'm not using a walker. That's for old people. And perfect. So you've already figured that out. And what I'll tell people is they're like, I'm not gonna walk with the walker. It makes me look old. I'm like, well, you know, this sounds cold, but do you feel more old standing up with the walker? Or do you feel more old on the ground? Like, and sometimes that's what it boils down to. And that's not meant to be mean at all. That's meant to say like, you can stay active and feel good. And if you have to use an assistive device to do that, you know, that's, in my mind, you got to do a cost benefit analysis, but I'm all about, in particular, like the waiting staff, or I love trekking poles. They keep you upright. They give you a little more support if you do have balance problems. You can stay active in the winter or on uneven ground. They look sporty. If you had, you know, it sounds vain, but it does come into a lot of people's equation. What does it look like? And people, I find, are more likely to use a trekking pole than a cane. So yeah, that's a great option as well. Sorry, I don't think that was your question, but I hijacked it anyways. Did I answer that question as far as like the strength balance component? Okay. Other questions?
Andrew,
Yes.
does one's personal weight somewhat dictate the exercise program?
Say that again.
Does one's personal weight, how much they weigh, determine their exercise program to some degree?
I'm going to say it doesn't dictate it any more than any underlying health condition. So I know one of the big questions I'll get is like the relationship between weight and arthritis, in particular the knee. So I would say the weight in general has no more bearing than the joint pain that they're feeling at that given time. Did that answer the question, or was I evasive?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know.
Some blood pressure pills lower your heart rate.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. I don't know if anyone heard that, but Gary's question was some blood pressure, and I'm gonna jump on board with that too. And heart medications will alter your response to heart rate. So like in particular, when I see a beta blocker on people's med list, I get a little disappointed because I can't use the heart rate monitor anymore because they'll call it a blunted heart rate response because it doesn't rise and fall. And that's what that medication is intended to do, is to prevent it from going too high. I'm glad you brought that up. So for those of you on a beta blocker or some heart rate medications, the heart rate will not work. So that's where you would use the perceived exertion scale. And that's where that scale actually becomes very valuable. I would say there are certain conditions as well, like stroke and Parkinson's. They will say neurologically they have a blunted heart rate response. So it doesn't mean you can't get the heart rate up, but it may mean it doesn't look like when you normally just have you do exercise, you get a increased heart rate. So that's where that heart rate scale is really really valuable and important. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I completely left that out. Because I'll look at MedList and I'll see that beta blocker and I'll be like, oh man, guess we're using perceived heart rate today. Yeah, thank you. That's perfect.
So are you saying that the monitor, in those circumstances, the monitor would give you a false reading?
Oh yeah, thank you. No, the monitor gives an accurate reading, but the heart rate won't go up. Like you could exercise until they collapse from exhaustion. And if that medication is working, it will limit the amount that rate can go up. So yeah, the monitor is accurate, but the heart rate just won't rise. So you know, no matter how hard you exercise, in theory, if it's working, it won't go up.
Yeah, my experience with those heart rate medications, I used to love seeing the 130s pop up on the machine.
Yeah,
Oh, it's fun, you know?
it is fun.
Yeah, so now I have to work really hard to get it over 100.
Yeah,
And the
probably.
perceived exertion level to get it over 100 is a step higher than I would do to 130.
Yep.
And my question always has been, am I doing myself any good? I would have to say yes, because my rest rate is so low
Right.
comparatively. You know, if your rest is at 70, you're hitting 130, you're doing good. If your rest is 50, you're hitting 100, you're still doing good.
Right. Right. I would say, yes, you're doing good. But the big thing with that is adjusting. I'll tell people we need to adjust our expectations.
Yeah.
So like if you can't get it there, don't beat yourself up. Like you're doing good. And that's a big part of exercise is the motivation component. Like if you feel like you're beating yourself up every day, who wants to keep doing that?
Well, losing those 130s was a big demotivation thing, I'm telling you.
Right. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up because that's a huge component. Between questions here, I have another thing that I wanted to share. So like thinking about, so we heard about cardiovascular, strength training, balance training. Those all sound real simple. But then you look, if you Google exercise right now, you will get literally thousands of options. So the cool thing is that we talked about cardiovascular is getting your heart rate up. Strength building, you're looking for strengthening major muscle groups. Balance, you're looking for a little bit of wobble or challenge in any of your activities. You may be looking at some of these exercises and being like, well, some of those describe multiple versions of what I'm looking at. And that is true, which is cool. So for example, like what about dancing? So dancing gets your heart rate up. Dancing can challenge your balance. Dancing can strengthen you. I mean, you look at ballet dancers, they are some of the pound for pound strongest athletes you will see. So you don't have to feel like I'm going to break it up. I'm going to do cardio on Monday and then strength on Tuesday and then balance on Thursday. We could choose some interventions that actually address all three of those. Like dancing and sports are a really good example of exercises that will address multiple different things. I play hockey, so that's a day you know for sure I'm not going to run on hockey days, and I'm probably not going to weightlift on hockey days. Another one of my favorites is, has anyone heard of either Tabata or high intensity interval training? I'm seeing some nods, some no's. So in those instances, what they will do is you can use an interval timer. Again, I'm very cheap. I get a free one on my phone. It's called Interval Timer. I got it on the App Store for free. And I set myself up so I've got a minute timer and a 30-second timer. So on my minute, I'm doing a set exercise. So maybe squats, maybe lunges, maybe push-ups, doesn't matter. And then I'm resting for 30 seconds. So that's a good way that I'm getting both my strength training and my cardiovascular training at the same time. So I'm a huge fan of interval training. You can get a lot done in a short amount of time. And again, like easy, get it on your phone or get 2 timers from the dollar store. I love the dollar store. You know, and the tricky part is like figuring out like how much should I be exercising? How much should I be resting? That takes a while to figure out. So it took me probably like 4 years to figure out my ideal intervals. Doesn't have to take that long, but I'm just really nitpicky about my exercise just because of my career. But yeah, interval training is a really cool way that you can get multiple different modes of exercise in at the same time. Any other ideas on like, let's talk about it. You guys know any good ideas for exercise? Walking, swimming, interval dancing, what else? Gardening. So gardening, you would say in that instance, what is your goal for that? Like what are you addressing? Strength, balance, cardiovascular wise? All of them. Exactly. It depends on what you're doing. So like for that, if you're using it as your cardiovascular wise, you would want to use your perceived heart rate. Because if you're taking too long planning the radishes, maybe it's not a cardiovascular exercise anymore. Or maybe if you're walking on a lot of uneven ground and you feel unsteady, maybe that becomes your balance exercise. So it could be, for a lot of people it's not, for a lot of people it is. So you just have to look at like, what am I addressing with this? Okay. 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 So that would be. Okay. Okay. Sure.
Pickleball would be cardio
Oof.
and balance.
Pickleball. Awesome exercise. I love bike riding. Absolutely. There was an article that came out in 19 showing that bike riding was one of the better cardiovascular exercises for people with Parkinson's. Definitely a core and balance exercise to some extent.
Hi, Andrew. I went into the Turning Brook one day and all the girls and men were in the gym, not the gym, but whatever that was, living room. And they were watching Sit and Fit. And I had not seen that before. I went to my TV and it was on the other day, but I had my grandson there, so I couldn't participate. But how good is the Sit and Fit, where you're doing things more in slow motion? Have you ever seen that program?
I've seen that program. So yeah.
How much help would that give you if you wanted to do that every day?
So so I'm just gonna repeat. The question was Sit and Fit. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Sit and Fit. The question is, how effective is that? And my question is always going to revert back to, it depends on the person, and it depends on the purpose. So like, let's say if you can walk, let's say 3 miles, and you're doing your Sit and Fit and you're realizing that that rate of perceived exertion is more like a 1 or 2, not an effective cardiovascular exercise. Or let's say, I'm going to say it's always not going to be a balance exercise, because since you're planted, for the vast majority of people, that is not going to challenge your stability at all. But let's say maybe you have some balance concerns and you want an avenue to work on some strength exercises. Maybe that's a fantastic place for you to be. So again, you want to break it down to, is it balance, cardiovascular, or strength? And then it depends on the person. So like in particular, you're saying like in Turning Brook, they use it because they don't have the availability. Like, it is impossible to have one-on-one to make sure everyone's safe with that. And that gives them some level of safety with a cardiovascular exercise in that instance. So in that instance, it's really good. But let's say you're a little more active community ambulating, and that's not challenging your cardiovascular balance as much as you would like. And anything sitting is probably going to be a pretty minimal challenge to leg strength, I would say. So I will start a lot of people sitting or laying down to work on upper body strength or even working on some body positioning. But as far as like challenging lower body strength to the capacity of your ambulating already around, probably not as effective. Does that help answer that question? Okay. I know I gave a lot of vague answers because it depends a lot on who and what you're working for.
Yeah, to address that issue a little bit more, I had my dad for a while and he had some mobility issues and I was taking him to chair yoga.
Mhm.
And I would do it with him so that he'd do it for one. And the chair yoga is not useless.
No,
No,
absolutely not.
As far as trying to move your major joints and things, it's well worth the time. Compared to regular yoga, yeah, it's easier, but that's question again is don't let
Yeah.
the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, that's good. I'm gonna steal that. Can I steal
Yeah,
that?
you can
Yeah,
steal
that's
it.
perfect.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, if I can piggyback off of that, you think like maybe the purpose of those exercises is to make you mobile enough so that you can do cardiovascular or so that you can do balance exercises. Like, let's say maybe someone has, I've run into this before, maybe someone has really intense hip tightness from either being like stuck in a hospital stay or something like that. Maybe we need to sit and be fit and chair yoga to get that hip mobile enough so that it's safe to do some walking. Yeah, I love that. I'm going to use that probably today. Yeah.
It's the same thing. You can't walk much. Fight it tomorrow.
There you go.
You didn't do yesterday,
There you go.
you know?
Gotta move.
Got to move. That's it. That's what it all boils down to. One thing I get too is a common question is like, what about machines? People like either I've noticed either an intense love or fear of machines. I would say, again, it depends on the person and the place, but a machine is no more helpful or dangerous than any single exercise. So let's say, someone says like a machine is too hard for me. Well, it could be, or it could be way easy for you. So like first, an example, we've got like a recumbent stepper. And they're like, well, that's too hard. And I'm like, well, what if I turn the resistance all the way down? Now it's not too hard. Or they're gonna say like, that's too easy. I'm like, well, we're not gonna use legs today. We're just gonna use your arms. And they're like, oh, dang it. And then they'll say, well, like, body weight, that's no big deal. I can do anything body weight. And it's like, okay, well, let me see you do a single leg squat or pistol squat. It's like, whoa, that's really hard. So I would say like, when I look at machines, I'm going to look again at what am I addressing with this specific thing? Like there's no good or bad machine, just like there's no good or bad exercise. I would just really encourage everyone to, take a step back and say, what am I accomplishing with this? And you don't have to just microanalyze everything like I do, but like just on a general sense, am I looking at strength? Am I looking at heart rate, or am I looking at balance? Does this exercise accomplish any of those? Is it perfect? Probably not. There's no perfect exercise. But like what am I going into the gym or going into my basement or just doing with my husband or wife today to help me feel better tomorrow? Anything else? Yeah, please. Yeah.
How much time would you recommend on the new step machine? And then also, what exactly does it do for us? Does it cover everything? The recumbent?
Yeah. Okay, again, the question, you guys can probably hear this, I'm gonna repeat anyways. The question is, how much time should I spend on the new step and what does it do for you? I would say in particular, again, so what you're doing is you're seated. So you're probably taking any balance component of that away, which is not a bad thing necessarily. You're most likely addressing cardiovascular health with that. In some instances, you may get muscle soreness depending on how active you are. My guess would be that everyone in here walked in here. So I'm guessing you're most likely not, unless you're cranking all the way to the maximum, you're probably not getting a strength benefit from that. So what you're looking at is you're looking at a cardiovascular. So the question is, how long should you be on it? That will fall into this component. So like if you're using that for your exclusive cardiovascular fitness, you're looking at probably like a half hour of moderate intensity, or no, I think it's like 45 minutes of moderate or 30 minutes of intensity per session, maybe like 5 days in a week. Again, to reach back though, like I give a lot of flack to the new step, completely undeserved, because maybe that is what you're going to use this for cardiovascular exercise, and maybe you have recovering from an ankle fracture. Like I'm not going to tell you to walk to get your cardiovascular when it's painful, but we can pop on the new step and really get your heart rate up. That's awesome. Or let's say like I do this sometimes with my Parkinson's patients where they have some balance problems and walking is not a good option today for getting your heart rate up, but I want that heart rate high. And so I'm going to pop them on the new step because we don't have to worry about balance here. We're just working on getting that heart rate high. So it is a very valuable tool depending on what you're using it for, most likely getting your heart rate high. Does that help? Does that answer the question? Okay, good. Come on, someone give me a wild one. Okay.
What's the advantage of getting your heart rate high?
Whoa. You're asking dangerous questions now because I don't know how long you guys have today, but we might be getting a hotel room. Getting your heart rate high does a lot of different things. One, adequately pumps blood to the muscles in your body. So we're actually getting nutrients to your muscles and your nerves. And the biggest thing is your brain. So like if you look at gold standard for any neurological condition, so we're talking multiple sclerosis, stroke, Parkinson's, even like mild cognitive decline, the gold standards for what they'll call neuro regeneration is cardiovascular exercise. So it both keeps your brain healthy and it keeps your nerves healthy. And some people might actually find this surprising, but they've even done head-to-head comparisons of, does it matter if I'm doing exercise or does it matter, like, can I overcome that with like, let's say brain games? Like that's huge right now. It's like, can we play brain games to keep my mind engaged? And a lot of them find that actually the cardiovascular exercise is more effective for cognitive levels than the brain games. Obviously, the combination of the two of them is the most effective. But like if you're comparing head to head with one versus the other, a lot of times they're finding that getting your heart rate up helps your brain stay healthy. Another one is lung health, like anything pulmonary. Cardiovascular does a really good job at controlling your oxygen saturation levels. Tricky part with that one is that, you know, if you get to the point where your blood oxygen is falling because you're driving your heart rate too hard, too fast, then you're kind of limiting that help. So that would be an example where someone might have to exercise longer at a lower rate to get those same effects if you've got some sort of lung or like pulmonary condition. But there's all, I could go on for days. So let's say like blood sugar levels. So anyone with diabetes or a metabolic syndrome, getting your heart rate high helps you regulate your blood sugar better. Again, depending on that, let's say if you get your heart rate up high, you start burning off all of your blood sugar and then you go into like a low blood sugar state. That's where you really have to monitor that blood sugar well. But you could look at almost any condition and say it's going to help for some sort of reason, like I'm failing on creativity right now, just thinking of all the ways that the increasing blood flow helps. Let's talk like balance. If you increase your heart rate, it increases the rate at which your nerves fire. So like your nerves can fire faster or slower. And if you've got faster nerve firing rates, your reaction time is better, your foot positioning is better, your target hitting is better. I could go on for days on this. Any other examples of how increasing heart rate can improve your life? Pain, there we go. A lot of people think of like a historic model as thinking pain is specifically damage to the body. You know that's not necessarily true. All pain is perceived. All pain is real, but all pain is perceived, which means that there is some source to that pain. But you think about it like a stereo amplifier. There are certain factors that can either turn that up or turn that down. Sleep is a good one. If you get poor sleep, we know that levels of pain go up. So that didn't do anything to the problem, but we know it changes up or down. Same thing with increasing your heart rate. If you have good heart response, the nerves fire better, pain is less. So that's really cool.
How about overall general health?
Can you, so I'm asking you to be more specific about being general, like what exactly are you?
Just how a person feels, if they can get their heart rate up and they just, let's say they're having a good day and they're not hurting all over and they're not
Okay.
experiencing a lot of pain.
Okay.
They just have a really good day physically about themselves and mentally,
Yeah,
yes.
just how you feel.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, actually, so I'm going to get specific on a general question you asked, but depression is a huge one. They're finding, and this is like statistically, people with depression feel better. No matter what any of the other symptoms are, people with depression feel better, maybe not good, but better with cardiovascular exercise. But yeah, like we said, pain tends to be less, not gone, but less. When you get good at getting your heart rate up, you can get it up faster and more accurate. So let's say like someone who hasn't exercised in 20 years will either, their heart rate will kind of spiral. You'll either see it spike really high or they can't get it high. But someone who's been exercising regularly, they'll get their heart rate right to a healthy, happy medium real quick, and then it'll go down real quick. So you're thinking about just like day-to-day functioning, people do better when they train cardiovascular exercises or modes like that. Did that answer? I know I got too specific again. Okay, yeah. And if you guys want, I know most people are not interested in the really fine detail like I am, but there's a few freaks out there like me. If you guys want this article or anything cited to what I said, please feel free to get a hold of me. I really like questions. I just always reserve the right that if your question is specific enough, I may say I need to see you for that. Like for the example where it would be a huge injustice to you if I told you across these two podiums what I think you should do about that, because I think it deserves more specific evaluation. So that's what I'll always tell people is either I'll be like, oh yeah, no, that question is really easy to answer, or I'll say, no, this deserves more time. In which case, so again, this is more specifically towards what I do, but let's say you have a question for a trained physical therapist or physician, I would recommend really probably getting a hold of your primary care, getting either an appointment with them or even asking like, can I get a script for this? They may say yes or no. They may say, I want to see you, or they may say, no, that sounds very appropriate. Or in the state of Michigan now, We have what's called direct access. So it means we can see people legally right in the door. Unfortunately, that doesn't always mean that insurance will pay for that. It's worth calling, and we may say, yeah, I'll see you right away, or no, it's going to be more effective for your budget to go see your physician first. But you can always call us and we'll hopefully have an answer for you on that end. I know we've been seeing more people direct access because either they felt comfortable paying out of pocket or their insurance will cover like the first like 9 visits or 21 days or something like that. So it's unfortunately, it's real specific to insurances, which is my favorite part of the job. Yeah. All right.
And what is a good
Yes.
balance exercise? Just something that's quick. Balance exercise.
Balance exercises. So I would say I'm extremely reluctant to answer that specifically for the same reason that it depends on, so people have different balance dysfunctions. So it depends, like, are you, is it more of a strength component that you can't hold this form, or is it more of a sensation problem? My general recommendation is, just like any strength exercise, you can find a million balance exercises online. And how I tend to guide people is like 3 rules. Is it specific to you? So like if it's not hard to you and it's hard to someone else, that doesn't mean it's good exercise for you. So maybe standing on one leg is hard for me, but for you, it's like piece of cake. Ditch it, not worth your time. You want to feel a little bit of a wobble, but not so much that you feel like you need to grab hold of something. So like, for example, I like practicing, I do it in my clinic. We've got like these parallel bars. They look like dance bars, but like at home, like a countertop is really great to practice next to because you can grab hold if you need to. You want to feel like you've got something wobbling, but not so much that maybe you're tensing up top. Maybe you're afraid for your life and you want to grab hold. Those are saying like that's a little bit too hard. But like if you're just standing here like this, like, yeah, this is pretty nice. It's probably a good sign that that's not hard enough. Yeah, I guess my advice to you is kind of like experiment around, or like talk to a trained professional. That's another way to do it. I tend not to give, I believe enough that everyone's individual, that I tend not to give out exercises at group meetings, because something that's right for you may not be right for anyone else in here. But definitely I would suggest getting in front of a countertop, experimenting a little bit, but you want to feel safe and you want to feel challenged. Those are the big 2. Does that help? I mean, I know I intentionally didn't answer your question, but does that give you a start? A little bit? Okay.
Well, if that's it on your presentation and no more questions, thank you very much for
Yeah.
this. Very much enjoyable and knowledgeable.
Good. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.